All right, good afternoon or morning. It's still morning. Good morning, folks. I think we'll get started so folks can get on with their day. For those of you who don't know, I'm Jim Rogers. I'm a member of here at First United Methodist and a member of the admin team of our merger team. So I got elected to give an update on where things stand right now. I'm so pleased to do that. I'll kind of go through a few notes and things like that, but certainly happy to try to answer questions if I can, and there are some other folks from the merger team here as well. Excuse me, so just want to kind of mention where we're at. I think since the last time we gave an update, last time we gave an update to the congregation, we'd mentioned that we were working with a faith-based commercial real estate firm called Foundry. We continue to work with them. They've been terrific to work with. Where we're at in our process there is they have started to draft and prepare real estate listings for each of our two properties, presented those to our merger team or to our admin team, and we reviewed those. Concurrent with that, they're also looking at other property options for our merged church in the community, whether that be properties that we might consider purchasing, whether that might be properties we consider leasing. So we just kind of started to look at that and look at some examples. What they were kind of initially trying to do is illustrate to us that there are options out there for us to consider, which is exciting to know that that's a possibility for us to look at. In addition, we're also, these notes are a little bit older, but we have now started to work with an attorney who, again, specializes in mergers, because one of the things that we have to also make happen is that our two churches have to incorporate together as one church. I don't know if there are any attorneys in the room, but as you might imagine, it's a little bit of an involved process because it speaks to how First was incorporated originally and how Christ was incorporated originally, and whether those were incorporated the same way and whether the merging becomes a little bit of a challenge. So we're working through some of that as well. And then our conversation continued to discuss the possibility of listing both properties for sale. And we have started to move through that process, so I want to speak to that a little bit. Again, not surprisingly, and it's a good thing, it requires the approval of a number of layers in the church, the larger church, so that one individual church just can't make that decision. So the first of those was that we gave a presentation earlier this month to the district board on church location and building, and they're kind of a district board for our church that considers all types of things regarding properties. They have given us their blessing to list the properties. Also, as an aside, several of the board expressed their support for what we are doing, acknowledging its complexity, and offered us their prayers. And one of the other comments that they made was that they were very pleased, and I'll even say impressed with how far along we are in our process, but kind of how well organized we are in our process. It seems like other churches that start down this road just don't kind of have their arms around what needs to happen, and they're just they're struggling more. So we seem to be in a good place with that. It would also need to go before the Northern Illinois Cabinet, but most importantly, what I wanted to mention, well, actually, I'm going to pause there. Also need to go before the Northern Illinois Cabinet. Then kind of an aside to that, and I'll come back to it. In addition, the admin team has now begun discussing, looking at budgets for the church and staffing for the merged church, obviously critically important as to how we will continue to live out the mission of our church. So we've started to do that. Those efforts began in earnest at our last meeting, and all of that following the vision that the vision team has put together for us as well. I will mention too that we sort of decided that we would start with the most conservative approach in terms of what we would look at for staffing and budget, and that probably doesn't mean what you think it does. Conservative in this regard doesn't mean like the smallest, tiniest. It would mean if we were to try to do everything that we believe that we as congregations want to do, what would that look like? Because it's most important to say, this is what we want to do, and now let's figure out if and how we can do that. So that's kind of where we started from a staffing and a budget perspective, is what's everything that we would like to do? And let's start there, and then as we continue through this process, figure out what is possible and what is feasible. So that's kind of where we are in the specific work. The next step then would be that we need to schedule a church or two church conferences with our district superintendent for approval for listing the properties for sale. What we would do then, and the notice of that church conference is required to be given at least 10 days prior. We would look to do it after a Sunday service like this, excuse me. And we would look to do that in the next month or so as we kind of finalize a few things. And a vote then would be taken there. And again, but to clarify, that would be a vote to list the properties for sale. And what it would require is a simple majority vote of those in attendance at that church conference. But I want to be very clear, this is the last thing I've written here, but very clear. A separate church conference, would then be required to execute the sale of the property. So please understand, those are two very different things. One is the decision to list the properties, and then we would presumably receive offers for the properties, and then separately we would have to come back and have a vote on whether or not to sell. And that's very critically important because when we list them, what comes of that could in large part drive the decisions that are made about whether to sell one or both or what have you. And while those efforts continue, we will continue our efforts with Foundry to understand what our options could be. So I assure you, if I may, on behalf of the admin team and the entire merger team, we will not be coming back to you to say, let's take a vote on whether or not to sell, and then everyone here would raise their hands and say, and what are we doing next? That won't happen. Somebody said it's the getting on a boat if you don't know where it's going. No one is going to ask all of us. We are not going to ask ourselves, let's get on this boat, and then we'll figure out where it's going. We would be bringing concepts and ideas back to the congregations about where we would be looking to go before a vote would be taken to sell. But we feel it is critically important to have the information about, again, what is the market value of these properties and things like that, and because that could in large part drive the decisions that we make about what would be next for us. I see some nodding of heads from other folks on the merger team, which makes me feel good, and I haven't seen anybody shake their head or start to fold their arms. So I feel pretty good that I think I've laid it out the way I was supposed to. But let me pause there now and ask if there are any questions about what I've laid out. And I'll be shocked if there aren't. Please don't hesitate. Yes, please, Marlene.
This initial listing could sort of be described as an information gathering of value.
Great question. No, it's more than that. It will be legitimate. We will be looking for legitimate offers for the property, but no different than if any one of us put our house on the market. You put your house on the market, you take offers. You want this for your house, and you get 3 offers like this, and you say, you know what, I'm not going to sell my house. So we are not obligated to sell, but no, these will be legitimate, truly legitimate. The intention will be bona fide offers for the properties. Yes, sir. Yes, Ken. We are listing both. Again, just to have a full understanding of all of our options and all of so there aren't any variables out there because, again, we might be surprised with the valuation, the true market value that comes from one or the other, and again, that might kind of drive some of the decisions that eventually get made. But listing them separately, not as some sort of a package or anything like that, because obviously very different properties and very different neighborhoods and that kind of thing. Great questions. Yes, sir. Sorry? Yeah, listing price, that's a great question. So what has been talked about is we will probably establish a list price for the Christ property, given its location in a residential neighborhood. Foundry they are still kind of working through it, but they are somewhat advising us that in this property, we may not put a list price because this is valuable. Any real estate in Elmhurst is valuable. The Christ property is valuable, but this is unique. And so rather than, and one of the conversations, or some of the conversations that have been had is that there are probably some, what's the right term, some larger, perhaps institutional organizations that might be interested in a property like this. Well, you can point, don't look back there. Jason's pointing a certain direction, but truly though, you could point lots of directions when you really kind of broaden your thinking a little bit. And so the idea that, and as we've brought Foundry up to speed and as they've come to understand the Elmhurst market, they've said that they think it probably would be in our best interest not to set a list price. We've had the property appraised, so we have a general idea, but really put it out there and see what it would garner. Yes, ma'am. Right. Yep. Absolutely. For sure. Other questions? recognize that, and I can tell from, just some of your expressions and all, it's a little scary, and we understand that. We want to all recognize that, and be mindful of that, and I know the merger team is trying to do that. And again, so to kind of to Marlene's question, it's not information gathering, but it is. So we are looking for bona fide offers, but we will use those offers as information to help. And when I say we, I mean we, not me or the admin team or the merger team. We will use that information to make decisions about where we go next. But we'll be much better equipped to make those with that information. Any other questions? All right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Is there a traditional length of time, sometimes with like a residential business versus commercial, what's like a length of time you would be
Accepting, yeah. That's a great question. I don't know if there's a traditional, one of the things that I believe, and I'm going to look to the folks who are at the meeting, I think Foundry did talk about setting, like we would take offers to X date. We haven't quite set that yet because we have to get all of our ducks in a row as to when we would do that, but it won't be one of those, well, we'll just put it out there and we'll give it, 6 or 9 or 12 months. It won't be something like that. I don't know exactly what that would be at this point, but we'll rely on their expertise. And as I said before, if you haven't been here, Foundry, the wing of Foundry, or the department of Foundry that we're working with, they're a large commercial real estate firm nationally, but they focus on faith-based real estate transactions. So this is what they do. They really, really know it backwards and forwards. Mergers, sales, the whole thing. So they really know what they're doing, and they've made us feel very good as we work our way through the process. Yes, sir. Yep, no, great question, great question. So I think I understand, and I think I can speak accurately I can answer your question accurately. We own it, and if we sell it, the proceeds stay with our churches or our merged church. I'm looking for Joe to nod his head a little bit, period. If, however, someday, 47 years in the future, the church goes out of business, then the assets and value of the church then goes to the capital C church. So we own it as long as we still exist, and then if we ever didn't, then it goes there. Joe, did I get that pretty right? Hey, not quite, not close enough.
I just...
no, please.
You are right, and I think just to sort of sharpen the point there, we do own it with some strings. How's that? In terms of, if we all decide, hey, let's go build a church in Hawaii, the conference is going to say no to that, because the resources should stay within the boundaries of the annual conference for mission and ministry within the annual conference. But as we've already heard from the district building, location, and committee, they're really encouraged by the work we have done. We will still have to gain approval, but we still own the assets and steward the assets.
Joe, I feel like one other point that they had raised too is if we went to those committees and said, we have a great offer, it's for $10,000 and we're ready to sell, they would not allow us to move forward with that. Because that wasn't a joke. I mean, it was a joke, but not a joke. If we went to them with some ridiculous offer and said, well, we're ready to sell, they'd say, no. There's a lot more value there that wouldn't make sense.
So we own it with support and accountability. How's that? And I think that's good. That's good for all of us. It keeps us all honest.
Thank you, Joe. Any other questions? Oh, we have a question from on high from Pete. I'll speak to it just because I'm at the mic. Yes, great point, Pete. So, great point. So, if we sell the properties, the proceeds from that can only be used for capital expenses like buying another building, maybe making capital improvements at one building or the other if we were to stay, but it cannot be used for operational expenses. It can't be used to pay the ComEd bill. It can't be used to pay staff. We're not quite sure yet if it could be used for lease payments. So as we continue down this road, we're going to continue to ask some of those questions. And I think one of the things that we're feeling, and Joe and Pastor Jim have said this as well, is that the higher up church, they want these things and these mergers and changes to succeed for the future. So we're hopeful that there might be, unless it went against things like the Book of Discipline, and maybe this doesn't even quite go that high, but there might be some flexibility around that. Like, for example, and this is just Jim Rogers saying this, if we were going to rent property and we said to them, well, we'd like to use, a portion of the proceeds to pay rent for a couple of years, as we kind of figure, we're hopeful that they might have some openness to that as we put all of this together. But yeah, to Pete's point, you can't use it. It's really intended for capital proceeds for capital expenditures.
Now you can invest it.
Yes.
If you sold property at a price, you invested it, and you can use the money you made on top of it, you can use that money for.
Great point. And this is why we have a really good committee, because we're all working together. Thank you for that. Point there being, so let's say, let's use silly numbers. Let's say we sold this church for $100,000 and we invested it at 4%. The 4% interest earnings that we would earn off of those dollars we can use for kind of anything, operational expenses. And so again, that might play into what we look at as we move forward and what decisions are made. Thanks, Pete. That was great stuff. Yes, John? Okay, great. And I think we would probably, John's point was the use of those interest earnings for those purposes would have to be approved by the church as well. And I think we would look to make that all part of our plan. So we're going to continue to look at available options. We're going to list our properties, understand what their value is, use all of that information then to try to come to some larger decision and direction and plan, future plan forward, and then bring that back to the congregations. Yes, Jen? The question was, do we know how many other churches in our conference are renting or leasing space?
Not many, but what I'll also say, Jennifer, is because of our work with Foundry, the conference has retained Foundry to work with all of our churches in our annual conference, because so many of our churches are in our position or worse. Like, we just had one church just had to sell its church because they were so behind on their mortgage payments that the conference is like, we have to liquidate this property today. So I think we're in a really good position, and we have a lot of encouragement to do this. There's a few churches in the city that are renting space as well. I think for most United Methodists, this is a different mindset to not own property. But for me personally, I think it's the way forward for churches. I think we have made ourselves landlords in church. The church is a terrible landlord. And sorry, Montessori, not trying to tell you something terrible, but we do not have the ongoing resources to support the property that we own. And so I think this idea that all of us think of owning the church is literally a building, even though we all grew up with the church is not a building song, right? But when we think of church, we're so stuck on physical space. And I think if we're going to survive as Methodists, especially in Northern Illinois, we're going to have to give up our buildings and love the gospel more than we love our buildings. So I'll just stop there. Sorry for another sermon, but
No. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. The merger team will continue its efforts.